Welcome to a new episode in our series Free Will in Astrology. Today with a very special guest, the Dean of Archetypal Cosmology in Astrology, Professor Dr. Richard Tarnas. Richard, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Volker.
And for the viewers, we will not do an introduction who Richard Tarnas is. We have on this site Astrology im 21. Jahrhundert with the address astrology.vonabisw.de. You find the special site about Professor Dr. Richard Tarnas, CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, with the topic Free Will in Astrology. The homepage is to be found here. The German viewers can read a biography here. And on the English homepage, there's a bit of a biography. But if you go to the playlist with a lot of videos, 15 only with Richard Tarnas in the beginning, if you go to this first video, which Chris Brennan had in a talk with Richard in 2016, you find a lot of information about his biography, and you find a lot of information about the content of his book, Cosmos and Psyche, so we don't have to repeat all that. And these are the books. The one I just mentioned is Cosmos and Psyche, which was published in 2006. And the book he became very famous in the 90s is The Passion of the Western Mind, published, I believe, in 1991. And his Prometheus book. I have a question to that. In one video you mentioned originally that had about more than 300 pages and you reduced it. Do you remember why you reduced it?
Yes, it was because as I was editing it, I had a contract to publish it with James Hillman, who is the founder of Archetypal Psychology. That's like psychology coming out of the Jungian world in Zurich. And he was the publisher of Spring Publications, which published Jungian and archetypal books. And as I was doing a final edit on the longer Prometheus the Awakener, I decided not to publish it because for a number of reasons. I realized that in order to bring astrology into the world of higher learning of the intelligentsia and so forth, I needed to address a larger historical background before jumping into anything that was assuming astrological principles, because astrology is so controversial for our contemporary academic world. So I decided to write Cosmos and Psyche at that point instead of publishing Prometheus. So that's what I did. The first part of Cosmos and Psyche, however, the history part, the history of philosophy and science, that turned out to be a big enough book on its own without the astrology that I just published Passion of the Western Mind first, because that was going to be the first part of Cosmos and Psyche. And so I decided to publish that first. That went out into the world and became, more of a success than I expected. It was adopted by like many universities around the world to be used in history of Western philosophy courses, history of Western civilization, etc. And after that was published, then I became a professor and decided to. It took me a while to get enough time to finish the Cosmos and Psyche. In the meantime, James Hillman at Spring Publications convinced me that we should publish at least a shorter monograph version, even if I didn't want to do the longer one. So that's what that Prometheus the Awakener is. It's a monograph that's shorter. It's about, I don't know, 70 pages or something.
In your long interview with or the talk with Chris Brennan, you talk with him about your biography, your education, Harvard, Esalen, CIIS, and there is an interesting gap. You mentioned that you left Esalen in 1986. The Passion of the Western Mind, which got you famous, was published in 1991. That's 5 years without income. What did you do in that time?
Well, as Friedrich Nietzsche says, praised be a moderate poverty. He who has less is so much the less possessed. So I had enough money that I had, I had been the director of programs at Esalen Institute and had for several years, and so I had built up some savings, and so I used those savings to support my little family in a redwood cabin in Big Sur, not too far from Esalen, about 10 miles from Esalen, up overlooking the ocean, the Pacific. But it was very secluded, very private, quiet, and there I wrote and finished The Passion of the Western Mind while continuing the research for Cosmos and Psyche. So it was a very focused period of writing. Just for you to know, it was actually, I left Esalen in 1984.
Oh.
So I was at Esalen for 10 years, from 1974 to 84. So I basically wrote after leaving Esalen for more like 7 years before the book was published. But I'd actually finished the book. I'd finished everything of the book by 1987, and then I added the epilogue in 1989. That's when I got the publishing contract for both books from Random House, that is, I think, owned now by a German publisher. Is it Bertelsmann, something like that? And so they actually own both the publisher of both Passion of the Western Mind, which was originally Ballantine books and Crown Harmony books, and then Cosmos and Psyche, which came out with Penguin Viking. And so both of those are now owned by Random House as well as by Bertelsmann, all in one publishing house. So I basically left Esalen in order to write full time, and I didn't know how long it would take me, but I knew I needed to write the book.
And then you became famous. And did Professor Dermot preside the CIIS in that time?
That's correct. He became president in I think 90 or 91, president of CIIS. He'd been the chair of the philosophy department in New York at City College of New York, or City University of New York, at Baruch College. And he accepted the presidency at CIIS in San Francisco in 1990, early 91, and he invited me to come up and both be a professor there and also start a program.
After The Passion of the Western Mind was published, or did you know him beforehand?
I had met him beforehand. He actually had seen the manuscript. We were at a conference called the Revisioning Philosophy Project that was held at Esalen, with many philosophers and scientists and theologians from around the world who were interested in a transformation of the academic discipline of philosophy, feeling that we needed to get to something much deeper, bigger than what was being taught in the universities. So both Robert McDermott and I were at that conference. We met. I showed him my manuscript for The Passion of the Western Mind, and he, being a professor of philosophy who'd been teaching this material for many years, he then immediately, to my honor, he felt this was the book that he had been looking for, and was very happy about it having been written. And so then when he became president of the graduate school there in San Francisco, he invited me to move up to San Francisco and begin teaching as a professor.
In your talk with Chris Brennan, you mentioned your future book projects. Your Cosmos and Psyche is talked a lot about in that conversation with Chris Brennan, but in the end, you mentioned that a book project of yours in the future would be not only this one planet Uranus, but all the 45 combinations of planets for archetypal cosmology. Is that still in the pipeline, or did you cancel that project?
Oh, no, that's in the pipeline. It's just that I have a number of books in the pipeline, which is one reason why I decided to retire after 30 years of teaching at CIS. I retired earlier this year in order to devote my time to finishing the books that I only had time to be writing in my notebooks over the last 20 years, and now it'll take me a little while to transform my notebooks and other lectures and so forth that I have everything for, and to translate that into a really a series of strong books. I'm not a fast writer. It takes me a while to bring them forth in a form that I feel will endure. So I want to take adequate time to do a good job.
We will talk in the third part of this talk about the rest of the story in CIS, but now I want to go to archive, because now I want to quote you from we'll talk about archive later, what that is, and the importance for the research field, but we will now go into the content in the first issue of this academic journal, Archive, the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology, issue 1, on page 32, you write, in the Platonic view, archetypes, the ideas or forms, are absolute essences that transcend the empirical world, yet give the world its form and meaning. Could you elaborate on what you mean with that?
Sure. So basically there I'm drawing on the long tradition that was basically initiated by Plato in Athens in the 4th century BC or BCE, and in the Platonic tradition that Plato initiated, perhaps the most essential insight that he's bringing is the idea that this world that we experience in everyday life and we see in our backyard gardens or in walking down the street, everything, or in as we look through the telescope in the universe, anything that we experience in this life has certain fundamental qualities or forms that give them their pattern, their structure, their mode of growing and unfolding, and that's particularly comes in from Aristotle, that last part, the developmental part, but then also is what gives it and things their meaning, and that this level of form that informs the world is in some sense timeless and beyond space and time, that it is has a non-local quality, so that if we take something like beauty, if I see a beautiful sunset, or a bird lands on my backyard tree branch and it's got beautiful feathers, and I see a beautiful child, or I hear music that just seems to me exquisite. All of those are forms of beauty, but Plato says everything that is beautiful in this world is beautiful because it participates in archetypal beauty, which is timeless, which is we in English we use capital letters. We instead of it being something is beautiful, we say when we talk about the archetype of beauty, we put capital B, beauty, the very principle of beauty, which is what informs all beautiful things. And the Platonic tradition basically holds that everything in this world, whether it's beauty or things that we experience as good or evil, or just or unjust, or even a horse or a mother, what transforms a girl or a young woman into a mother, is when that transformation happens in the Platonic view, like a mother archetype, the great mother, or capital M, has entered into the mother and transforms their world. It transforms the body. They see and experience life differently. It's a total kind of cosmic shift. I mean, it's a different gestalt that she's living in, and that's entering into a new archetypal field, as it were.
Let me get
yes.
line in the issue number 5, when Dr. Becker Tarnas was the editor. From there on words, you write on page 105, it may be useful to reiterate here an essential, if theoretically elusive, characteristic of archetypes, namely that they are not so much things or entities as they are autonomous patterns of meaning. To clarify for our viewers, I'm on the side of people who think archetypes are entities, but you are obviously not of that opinion. So could you elaborate on your opinion that they are not entities?
Well, they're not entities in a way that we can describe a computer, or they're not concrete objects. So you could say,
I say I am on the side of entities, I mean the cosmology of the divine sphere, just below the higher one and the anima mundi, and in that sphere, in my opinion, the archetypes are located and are sort of born by the anima mundi. And in my opinion, they are entities, divine, angelic entities. That's my opinion, to clarify that.
Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. What I wanted to get at, though, is that these archetypal principles they can express themselves, manifest themselves in many ways as spiritual angelic entities is one form. as gods and goddesses, the way many of the ancients experienced. I mean, the world's mythologies are basically collective representations of archetypal beings, which you could say entities, that, but as filtered through the narrative imagination of different cultures. So they can express themselves mythically, they can express themselves as you say, kind of angelic beings. Like Rudolf Steiner has very beautiful descriptions of the archetypes in that way. I think it's in his book Theosophy. And then but they are also psychological forces, and in that sense they become more nebulous, like the Oedipus complex, or the hero archetype. Yes, it's an entity, but it's in a very shape-shifting, indeterminate form.
You have a daughter who got a doctorate thesis, a PhD, about the Red Book of Tolkien and C.G. Jung. In my opinion, C.G. Jung was meeting with real archetypes in his experience when he wrote down what he experienced from 1913 to 1960. Would you disagree with my opinion that he met archetypes in person?
Well, he didn't think so. He felt that he was experiencing archetypal images in person, but that he had basically his philosophical point of view was very much shaped by his early reading of Kant, Immanuel Kant. And so I think Jung, because Jung wanted to preserve the idea that nobody is experienced, that the archetypes can come through in so many different ways, and that he felt that the way to preserve the this multivalent quality of the archetype was to say that we only experience particular expressions, particular enactments, images of the archetypes, but he wanted to say the archetype itself is beyond human experience. Now, others since then, including me and James Hillman and others, Stan Groff, feel that, in agreement with you, that Jung actually did experience the archetypes directly. And I certainly feel that in my own life. I've had many experiences in extraordinary states of consciousness where I feel like I am experiencing the archetype itself, but all of human experience is participatory. We are always in anything that we experience is a reflection of our relationship with what we are experiencing. We don't register things as if we're not part of the equation. We are always part of the equation. And so then the task becomes how deep can we go in ourselves, and how much can we kind of cleanse our perception. William Blake has the idea that if we could cleanse our vision, open wide the doors of perception, we could see things as they are, infinite. We could see the archetypal level.
And that means, in the Hermetic sense, we climb the ladder with our divine spark in ourselves to get one with the one. And on that ladder, the archetypes reveal themselves more and more. And on the Jung level, what he experienced in this Red Book that was a certain level. It was not the unity with the divine. I agree with you on that.
Okay, good. And just to clarify, Jung's Red Book and the whole period in which he was most getting his powerful visions and dreams was 1913 to 1918 in particular. And then he kept working on the Red Book pretty much up until around 1928 or so.
So he switched from the Red Book to alchemy, and then he stopped the Red Book in 32, I think.
Okay, it'd be around there. And then, but as he said in his memoir, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he said that the experiences he had back in the during World War I and the 1913 to 1918 period, that was, he said, all those images flooded in from his unconscious, and they were overwhelming for him. And of course, he wrote them down, the narratives and the experiences. That's what the Red Book is about. Many mandalas, drawings, beautifully illustrate that manuscript. But he spent the rest of his life bringing a scientific, psychological, and philosophical articulation of those, what came in more in the form of powerful images and unfolding narratives, but he needed to formulate it in a way that would be useful for him as a physician, as a healer, as a psychotherapist.
I agree with you on that. I think what he did was he experienced the Red Book experiences, and then he realized if he would talk about that with his scientific colleagues, they would put him away in an institution. So he tried to translate what he experienced into scientific language, always knowing that that was a compromise.
That's right. And he decided not to publish the Red Book during his lifetime.
Yes.
And that came out later, as you know.
2009. It took a long time to get a hold of it. Okay, we come now to the second part. What is free will in astrology? And we have here, in your talk with Chris Brennan, you were talking about archetypal predictions instead of concrete predictions, the multivalence nature of the archetypes in archetypal astrology leaves room for free will because of the fundamental indeterminacy of an archetype. Is that still your position today?
Yes, I think that it's precisely because the archetypes are open to multiple embodiments. Every archetype has both light and shadow in the Jungian sense. Every archetype can be expressed in very noble ways or quite problematic, amoral ways or destructive ways. They can be life enhancing, they can be destructive. So the key the key to understanding how astrology could simultaneously be giving us a sense for certain powerful determinants or forces that are at work in our lives, but are not completely determining everything, how we respond to them, because of the very nature of the archetypes, the more we bring in of our own capacity for choice, for being aware of our unconscious, like to not be puppets of the archetypes, but rather participants co-creative participants in how they express themselves. Let me give you an example. For example, you can have, let's say, a Mars Pluto conjunction, let's say, in your natal chart, and that can express itself either as tremendous capacity for personal will and exerting one's a force of will in the world, like perhaps to transform the world in a very positive way, the way Gandhi did, who had a Mars-Pluto alignment, or Steiner is another one. Tremendous, like the Mars energy is empowered even deeper by the Plutonic, the combination of the two. But both of those together can also manifest as real violent urges, or a kind of macho aggression that could be quite destructive, a warlike belligerence, etc. So if I'm not conscious of ways in which certain complexes in my deep psyche, perhaps shaped by trauma or by early childhood experience or something like that, perhaps by karmic factors, if I haven't done any deep inner work, no self-exploration, haven't done psychotherapy, haven't done deep meditation or anything like that, and I'm just going through the world and just thinking what I see is the way things are without any reflection, then without any sense of psychological self-awareness, then I can think, well, this person makes me so angry, I'm just going to hit them. He is so deserving of my rage right now. Then I'm just a puppet of that complex. But if let me just finish one last thing. But if I am aware of the complex, perhaps have some insight into where it came from, traumatic experience, with an abusive relative or something like that, then when that energy comes up, I can reflect a little bit, take a moment and go, I'm really feel rage. I feel rage against this person, but I think I'm just going to hold judgment for a minute and find out what's really going on, because I might be projecting. I might be a puppet of the archetypal complex rather than acting out of more freedom.
Before we have to come to the break for the first session, what you're saying is basically the archetypal manifestation is set. The archetypes sort of set a field, a framework, but what you play in that framework is up to you. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I often give the metaphor or the analogy of music. The archetype, like as the planets are moving or they're in our natal chart in a certain form, and that gives us a certain sense of what are the big chordal structures of the music, the harmonic structures, but it's up to us what melodies we sing to it. It's up to us how we dance to that music. The culture might define the genre that we use, like whether it's classical music or jazz or rock and roll or hip hop, but it's up to us as to playing our role in how we and what notes we bring to those chordal structures to create the music that is finally heard. So that's where the free will comes in.
We have to stop here for the first part because we're at the limit of Zoom. So I stop the recording for now and we'll see each other in a couple of minutes.